Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
Town meeting on marijuana has thrust the controversial drug back into the headlines.
PLP Chairman Fred Mitchell laments the treatment of former Immigration Director William Pratt. That story straight ahead.
2 young Bahamian men face armed robbery charges in the magistrate's court.
Our news is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Topping news tonight, not everyone is feeling the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana's plans to hold a town hall meeting this Friday. Bahamas Christian Council President Delson Fernandez says he feels as though the country is being strong-armed into having a discussion that should not top the list of priorities at the moment. He said while the Christian Council has not yet taken a position on decriminalizing marijuana, there are still a lot of concerns.
You can do a town meeting on medical marijuana, but no town meeting on citizenship to change the minds and the views of people. Something's wrong with that.
The meeting is a part of the Commission's mandate to ascertain public opinion in CARICOM member countries on the idea of decriminalizing marijuana and is scheduled for Friday at 6 p.m. at Holy Trinity Activity Center. Bahamas Ambassador to CARICOM, Ruben Rabbing, has said the meeting doesn't represent government's position on the topic, adding its sole objective is to get Bahamians' views on the issue. However, Fernandez said once again it appears the Bahamas is being forced into something to suit the global community.
It's like someone sat back and said, okay, we're going to get the external party to ask the question, but the follow-up, we're ready for the follow-up. And that's been the Bahamian way. And so I have no doubt that this is the beginning of a journey.
Marijuana has already been partially decriminalized in Jamaica. The Commission has visited 5 island nations within the last 8 months, including Jamaica, Trinidad, and Suriname. Now the meeting will be held in the Bahamas, but guess who won't be there?
I wasn't invited. No, we weren't invited. And so hence the conversation. CARICOM is coming this week. No invites were sent out to the Christian Council. No invites were sent out to the pillars, I would think, of our society. And so either it's going to be an invite-only meeting,
Well, they said it's open to public.
but it was just announced today.
However, he said he will send a representative to listen. Fernandez says he feels there's a reason he didn't receive an invitation.
The fact that CARICOM is coming this week and we're finding out 2 days ahead of the meeting is either is an intent for the meeting not to be well attended, or those who are going to attend are already been invited to attend. And so if you want a meeting where only your opinion, people on your side, people who agree with you are going to come, you're going to tell all the people who agree with you.
The issue of decriminalizing marijuana isn't a new one, with some like former Democratic National Alliance leader Bramah McCartney supporting the idea. He had said too many young men are getting criminal records because they're found with small amounts of marijuana, while people committing more serious offenses get a slap on the wrist. To this day, the Christian Council has not yet taken a position on it, despite some religious leaders speaking out against it. So, when will we get the official position of the Christian Council?
We're going to put that on our agenda, and I'll have a statement from the council on that, because we were adding it. We were just studying it right now. We had a paper from the institute I just mentioned, our comrades in Jamaica who've battled this before us. There's no use not seeing what other jurisdictions from the Christian perspective and the council perspective have gone through. And I promise you, we will have a strong white paper.
Well, Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands is insisting there is no need to get riled up, as he says the decriminalization of marijuana is not a priority for the minister's administration. In fact, Dr. Sands says the only reason the topic is rearing its controversial head again is because of the government's regional obligation to host a meeting on marijuana. Jasmine Brown reports.
Dr. Sands says just because there will be a town meeting to discuss marijuana, there's nothing to get excited about, as he insists the minister's administration is simply testing the waters. Sands insisted while marijuana is an exciting topic, given what is happening around the world, there are more pressing matters that top the government's agenda.
While we can walk and chew gum at the same time, we believe that our focus ought to be on those things that have more of an impact on the lives of ordinary Bahamians. And despite the fact that there are some people who believe that marijuana is going to rescue our economy, I don't happen to share that view. And so it is down the line in terms of priority.
The health minister explained that Friday's town meeting is only being held to gauge how Bahamians feel about the idea. The meeting is a part of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana's mandate to ascertain public opinion on the matter throughout CARICOM member countries. Furthermore, Sands says the government is simply trying to fulfill its obligation to CARICOM. In March 2014, CARICOM countries agreed to establish a consultative process to look at the legal, social, health, and societal implications of marijuana use.
Well, this question keeps coming up over and over and over again. We have not formulated any dramatic change in position. What we have agreed to do is to participate in the CARICOM discussions about marijuana.
Sands said while there has been no dramatic change in the government's position, the Bahamas is running out of time to get these discussions going.
I have said that the Bahamas is not going to lead this initiative. That said, the CARICOM countries in 2014, I think in March of 2014, agreed to establish a consultative process throughout the Caribbean to look at the legal, social, health, and societal implications of marijuana use, whether for medicinal purposes, for recreational purposes, for economic purposes, etc.
That town meeting will take place on Friday at Holy Trinity Activity Center at 6 p.m. Reporting for R News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
As frigid conditions sweep nearby Florida, which reported snowfall in Tallahassee for the first time since 1989, Bahamians also bracing for a dip in temperatures. Freeport is expected to experience 51-degree weather overnight, while the temperatures are expected to drop to 60 degrees in New Providence tomorrow. The Bahamas Met Department issued a severe weather warning for the Northwest Bahamas for 2 hours earlier today, noting that surface wind observations from several islands indicated wind gusting from gale force to storm force, that is winds of 35 knots to about 50 knots. Well, PLP Chairman Fred Mitchell expressing concern over the transition of directorship of the Department of Immigration from William Pratt to Clarence Russell. Jared Higgs tells us that Mitchell welcomes the new director but feels he may be in over his head.
Former Immigration Minister Senator Fred Mitchell says the transition of leadership at the Department of Immigration has been poor, and former Immigration Director William Pratt was damned by Prime Minister Minnis with faint praise. The PLP chairman says compared with the treatment of the former Commissioner of Police, the Immigration Director was thrown to the wayside.
I think it is unfortunate that the government gives the impression that he did not act correctly during his tenure by the manner in which this transition is taking place. There's been no formal thank you from the government. The fact that when the Commissioner of Police left, for example, there was a formal handover ceremony. There was a public thank you from the government for his services. But this seems very much and too much of a backdoor way of doing things.
A leaked internal memo from Pratt dated December 29, 2017, advised staff at the department that Clarence Russell would take charge of the department starting on January 2nd. In that memo, Pratt thanked staff for making his 5 years as Immigration Director enjoyable, despite being stressful at times and the challenges within the organization. Mitchell says he isn't sure the government appreciates those challenges Pratt refers to, especially given the apparent expectations placed on incoming director Clarence Russell.
The new man, I know him well. He worked running the passport office, and I have no doubt that he will bring a fresh look at the situation. But we must not put unrealistic expectations on someone taking over, because that person can only function to the extent to which they have the resources and to which they have the support from the political authority.
Mitchell says what makes the situation so unfortunate is that the job of Immigration Director is one that attracts very little appreciation.
It is a thankless job. You know, the country competes for many, many resources, and immigration had to suffer through a lack of manpower, through a lack of weapons, the bulletproof vests. They had to depend on the private sector in many of the islands to move them around. So this is a tough job. And of course, the public never says thank you for anything they do.
Attempts to reach Russell were unsuccessful up to news time. Reporting for R News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Well, in light of the warning issued by Immigration Minister Brent Simonet, the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation is urging government to use discretion when dealing with employers who have illegals on their payrolls. Chamber CEO Edison Sumner tells our news that the chamber has issued warning to its members following the immigration crackdown, noting that it is the responsibility of employers to know who they are hiring. However, the threat of cash fines and criminal sentences may place an even bigger burden on businesses that are already facing challenges.
While that is maybe good on a regulatory side to force and enforce compliance, and we always talk about enforcing the rule of law, I think we have to also be careful at this rate about talking about any level of fees and penalties on business communities, especially now when the business sector and the private sector at large are really trying to hold the economy together and trying to keep the businesses operating in what for many may be very challenging times.
Chamber Chairman Mike Mora adds that employers have no excuse in regard to the immigration status of their employees.
I don't think there's any excuse for a business. You should know who works for you, period. That said, I think that it is incumbent upon the government to be humane in this process and recognize that this is not as simple as one big broom and you sweep everybody off the shore, that it is something that needs to be looked at carefully.
Sumner says the chamber will continue to work with and support the government to ensure its members are in compliance with the law. In light of the immigration crackdown, Sumner says he also expects to see the work permit process improve sooner rather than later. Two men accused of locking themselves in a convenience store freezer after robbing its customers had their day in the magistrate's court. Giorgio Bain has the detail.
Those two young men accused of robbing a local convenience store with an imitation handgun are brought before the magistrate's court today. 20-year-old Tico Moss of Crooked Island Street, dressed in the green striped shirt, and 22-year-old Javon Roll, also of Crooked Island Street, dressed in the green plaid shirt, appeared before Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt in Court Number 9 to answer to 3 armed robbery-related charges. It is alleged on Sunday, December 31, 2017, the pair, being concerned together, armed with an offensive weapon, did rob Hurry Hurry convenience store of $410, the property of Andrew Sinclair. Moss and Rowe were also charged with receiving. It is alleged that on the date in question, the pair did dishonestly receive $410, knowing the same to have been obtained by an offense. Finally, the two were charged with possession of an imitation firearm while committing an indictable offense. It is alleged that the pair had in possession an imitation black 9mm Taurus Millennium handgun. According to police reports, shortly after 6 that evening, 2 men entered the convenience store located on Ponciana Drive, held up several employees, and robbed them of cash. As the men were attempting to flee the scene, they were confronted by an employee who was armed with a licensed shotgun. The suspects then allegedly locked themselves in the store's walk-in freezer. The men were not required to enter a plea today in court and were remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections until they returned to court on February 28, 2018. Reporting for R News, I'm Giorgio Bain.
Still to come on our news, the way forward for Junkanoo Carnival under a new government. Plus, just how much will it cost for the government to complete the National Baseball Stadium? That's coming up when our news returns.